The Apache woman was dragged to the rancher's ranch, but he wasn't the monster she feared. Naomi woke to the soft light of dawn spilling across the mountains. The cool air brushed her face, and the smell of pine and earth filled her lungs. For a moment she felt safe, wrapped in the quiet of her home and the gentle sounds of her village. Her family was still asleep, her younger siblings huddled together, dreaming their small, peaceful dreams. Naomi treasured mornings like this. They reminded her of who she was, where she belonged, and the strength of the life she knew. But the calm did not last. From the edge of the valley came the sound of shouting, sharp and urgent. Naomi's heart beat faster, a cold shiver running down her spine. She knew that sound too well. Raiders, people who would take what they wanted without thought for others. She had heard stories, seen others disappear in the night. Her mind raced as she ran to the small window of their hut, peering into the distance. Dust rose from the trail that led into their village, and she could make out figures moving quickly, horses kicking up dirt. Naomi grabbed her youngest brother's hand and pulled him close. "Stay behind me," she whispered, her voice trembling but firm. Fear had always been a visitor in her life, but now it was real, pressing against her chest. Her parents appeared in the doorway, their faces pale but determined. Her father reached for a wooden staff, while her mother pulled Naomi's siblings behind her, forming a shield of love and courage. But courage would not be enough. The raiders were fast, ruthless, and too many. Within minutes, they were at the edge of the village, shouting demands and waving weapons. Naomi felt her chest tighten and her mind spun with possibilities. She imagined herself fighting back, imagining the monsters in their eyes. But deep down, she knew resistance would cost them dearly. The raiders were not looking for a fight. They wanted control, and they would take it. Before Naomi could think of a plan, one of the men pushed through the crowd. He grabbed her roughly by the arm, pulling her toward a horse waiting at the edge of the clearing. Naomi struggled, her small frame almost swallowed by his large hands. She screamed, calling for her family, but the noise of the raiders and the horses drowned out her voice. Tears streamed down her face, blurring her vision. She felt helpless, but even in that terror, a small flame of defiance remained. She would not give them all of her fear. The ride was long and jarring. Naomi's arms were tied, and she had no choice but to sit stiffly on the horse behind her captor. The wind whipped at her hair, stinging her eyes, and every turn of the path reminded her of how far she was from safety. She tried to memorize the landmarks, hoping that someday she might find her way back. Every tree, every rock, every bend in the trail became a part of her mental map, a small comfort in a situation that offered none. Hours passed. Naomi's muscles ached, and the sun rose high, burning down on the rugged land. She had learned to endure hardships in her life, but this was different. This was not about survival in the mountains or tending to her family. This was about being taken, about being completely outside her control. She looked down at the man riding in front of her, the one who had taken her, and saw not just a stranger, but a shadow of the fear she had carried all her life. And yet, even in the fear, Naomi's mind began to observe. The man was not shouting, not laughing cruelly, not even looking at her with the kind of anger she had imagined. He rode with purpose, calm, almost careful, making sure the horse stayed steady on the uneven paths. Naomi noticed this quietly, almost unwillingly. He was not what she had expected. She had imagined a monster, a cruel captor with a heart full of violence, but instead she saw a man who seemed careful, perhaps even patient. When the sun began its descent toward the horizon, the rider slowed. Naomi saw a large expanse of land open before her, a ranch, wide and sprawling, with fields stretching as far as the eye could see. Horses grazed peacefully, and a few workers moved quietly along the fields. It looked ordinary, not frightening, not cruel, but Naomi's heart still pounded. She did not know what awaited her there. She did not know if her life would ever be her own again. The man led her off the horse and helped her down, a surprising gesture of gentleness that made her flinch with suspicion. Naomi's wrists ached where the ropes bound them, and she pulled at them cautiously. He did not resist, only waited patiently until she loosened the bindings. For a moment, Naomi wanted to run, to disappear into the hills she had once called home. But she was far from the mountains now, surrounded by strangers and open land, with no path back. As she walked behind him toward the house, Naomi's eyes roamed the ranch. Everything seemed strange, yet oddly calm. Animals moved without fear, workers carried out their tasks quietly, and the wind carried the scent of hay and earth instead of dust and smoke. Naomi's mind struggled to reconcile her fear with what she was seeing. Could it be that this place was not the monster she had imagined? Could it be that this man, this rancher, was different? The house was large, made of warm wood, and smelled faintly of bread and clean laundry. Naomi felt a small flicker of relief. She had expected a prison, dark and cold, but instead found a place that seemed lived in. She was led to a small room at the side of the house, simple but clean. A bed covered with a thick quilt waited, along with a basin of water. Naomi hesitated at the doorway, unsure if she was allowed to sit or even touch anything. The man spoke softly, using words she did not understand, but the tone was calm, almost gentle. He gestured for her to rest. Naomi sank onto the bed, exhausted. Her mind replayed the events of the day, the raid, the capture, the long ride, but also the subtle ways the man had treated her. She could not trust him yet, she knew that, but she could not ignore what she had seen either. For the first time, fear was tangled with curiosity. Who was this man really? Why had he not hurt her? Why had he shown moments of care in a situation that should have been only cruelty? Night fell over the ranch, and Naomi lay awake, listening to the sounds of the house and the animals outside. She thought of her family, of the mountains, and of all the quiet mornings she had loved. She thought of the man, and the confusing mix of fear and relief she felt. She realized that she had survived much already, that fear had always been part of her, but perhaps it did not have to define everything. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled and Naomi shivered. But this time, it was not only fear that touched her heart. A small thread of hope had begun to weave through her thoughts. Perhaps tomorrow would bring answers. Perhaps tomorrow, she would learn whether this man was truly the monster she feared, or someone far more complicated than she could imagine. For the first time since she had been taken, Naomi allowed herself a single deep breath, letting the cool night air fill her lungs. She did not know what the future held. She did not know if she would ever see her family again. But she was alive. She was here. And even in the darkest fear, that small truth gave her a strength she had never known before. Naomi woke before sunrise the next day. The room was quiet, but the soft glow of the early light through the small window filled the space with a gentle warmth. She sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing her wrists where the ropes had left faint marks. The memory of the capture was still sharp, but she reminded herself that she had survived the worst part. She was here alive, and the man who had taken her, though still a stranger, had not hurt her. That thought was almost as confusing as it was relieving. She moved to the window and looked outside. The ranch was alive with soft sounds of morning. Horses moved in the fields, their hooves making faint impressions in the damp earth. Workers carried buckets, feeding animals or repairing fences. Smoke rose from a distant chimney, curling lazily into the sky. Naomi's heart felt tight and heavy with caution, yet a small part of her wondered, could this place really be safe? Her door creaked open and the rancher appeared. His name, she would later learn, was Samuel. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and gentle eyes, though his face was lined from years of work under the sun. Naomi instinctively tensed, expecting anger or cruelty. But Samuel smiled faintly and gestured toward the table in the corner, where food had been prepared. Bread, cheese, and a small bowl of fresh fruit waited. Naomi hesitated. She had been taught never to trust strangers too easily, especially men in positions of power. But she was hungry, and the smell of food made her stomach twist with need. Slowly, she stepped forward, her eyes never leaving Samuel. He watched quietly, giving her space, and when she sat to eat, he sat across from her, not touching her or the food, simply watching with a calm patience that was almost unnatural to her. As she ate, Naomi began to notice small things about him. The way his hands rested gently on his knees, the way he did not shout or make sudden movements, the way his eyes seemed to watch without judgment. She had expected cruelty, yelling, threats, or a harsh tone, but instead she found restraint. It confused her. She wanted to be angry at him, to fear him, but she could not deny what she saw. After breakfast, Samuel gestured toward the barn. Naomi stiffened. Did he intend to make her work? Did he plan to punish her? But when they reached the barn, he handed her a broom with a simple gesture. "Sweep," he said, pointing to the floor. His voice was calm and neutral, and for a moment Naomi thought he was testing her, seeing if she would refuse. But she realized the task was simple. It was work, yes, but not cruel work. As Naomi swept, she noticed the animals around her. Horses moved with graceful patience, cows grazed quietly, and chickens pecked at the ground. The barn smelled of hay and earth, not fear. Workers moved about, speaking softly to each other, laughing quietly. It was a rhythm she had not expected, a quiet life in motion, and it made her wonder about the man who ran it all. Was he really the monster she had imagined, or was he something else entirely? Samuel watched her sweep, but he did not interfere. When she paused to rest, he handed her a small cup of water. Naomi's hands trembled slightly, both from exhaustion and from the uncertainty of his intentions. She drank slowly, keeping her eyes on him, expecting a sudden change in mood. But he only nodded once and turned back to his own work, tending to the horses with careful hands. That small act of kindness, a cup of water offered without demand or judgment, made Naomi's heart stir in ways she could not name. Days passed in a rhythm that was strange yet soothing. Naomi learned the patterns of the ranch, observing Samuel as he moved through the land with quiet authority. He gave orders gently but firmly, and the workers obeyed out of respect, not fear. Naomi began to see that his strength was not cruelty but discipline and care. He spoke rarely, but when he did, his words were precise, thoughtful, and often kind. One afternoon, while Naomi was helping in the kitchen, Samuel approached her. He asked questions, not harshly, but with a gentle curiosity. She did not understand his words fully, but his tone suggested he wanted to know more about her, where she had come from, what her life had been like, what she liked. Naomi felt a surge of fear mixed with disbelief. Why would he care? Most men she had known used questions to manipulate or to judge, but Samuel seemed genuinely interested. For the first time since her capture, Naomi spoke a few words in her own language. Samuel listened, nodding slowly, his eyes soft. He did not laugh, scold, or dismiss her. He simply acknowledged her words. Naomi felt a flicker of trust, fragile but growing. She realized that he was not the man she had imagined on the long ride here. The monster she had feared existed only in her mind and in the stories of others. Samuel was something entirely different, something she had not expected. Even so, Naomi's fear did not disappear. She remained cautious, watching his movements, testing his patience with small gestures, hesitating to follow instructions, asking questions she knew he might not understand, remaining silent when she could have spoken. Each time, Samuel responded with the same quiet patience. He never raised his voice. He never punished her for hesitation. Instead, he waited, guiding her gently and allowing her space to adapt. One evening, Naomi found herself outside, standing at the edge of the fields. The sun was setting, painting the sky in gold and rose colors. She could see Samuel in the distance, repairing a fence with strong, steady hands. Something about the sight made her heart ease. though she would not have admitted it even to herself. She realized that the ranch, the land, and even the man who had captured her were not as terrifying as she had imagined. Later that night, as she lay in her small room, Naomi thought about the day. She replayed every moment, every interaction. The patience, the small gestures, the quiet care. It was all confusing, but it was also comforting. She realized that fear could be misleading, shaping her perceptions into monsters that did not exist. Samuel was not cruel, and perhaps, she told herself quietly, not all strangers were dangerous. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, Naomi dreamed not of capture or fear, but of small moments of understanding and quiet trust. She dreamed of the sun on the fields, the soft sound of animals moving, and the gentle presence of a man who was nothing like the monsters she had imagined. In the morning, she would face the day with cautious curiosity, still wary, still uncertain, but also with a small seed of hope growing inside her heart. The next few days brought routine and small discoveries. Naomi began helping with chores, feeding chickens, carrying water, sweeping floors. Each task, though simple, taught her something about the ranch and about Samuel. She observed how he treated everyone with respect, how he spoke gently to animals, and how he guided the workers without anger. Naomi began to realize that trust was not given all at once. It was earned through consistent action, through small moments of kindness and understanding. One afternoon, a sudden accident tested Naomi's perception of him further. A horse in the barn spooked, knocking over a bucket and startling Naomi. She froze, expecting Samuel to shout or scold, but he moved quickly, gently calming the horse and guiding Naomi to safety. His hands were firm but not harsh, steadying her without a word. Naomi's chest tightened with relief and awe. The monster she had feared, the one she had imagined in every shadow and every noise, was nowhere here. Instead, she found calm, strength, and protection. By the end of the week, Naomi began to feel a sense of belonging, though she did not yet admit it to herself. She still feared the unknown, still worried about her family, and still wondered what the future held. But she also saw a world where care could exist without cruelty, where strength could be gentle, and where a person who appeared to be a captor could also be a protector. Naomi's journey of trust had begun, small and cautious, but undeniable. She realized that fear, though powerful, could be tempered by observation and patience. And as she prepared for another night in her small room, listening to the quiet rhythms of the ranch, she felt something she had not felt in a long time, the faintest hint of hope. Tomorrow, she thought, she would wake and face Samuel again. And perhaps, just perhaps, she would see more clearly the man who was nothing like the monster she had imagined. Naomi woke to the soft light of morning again, but this time, it felt different. The shadows of fear that had haunted her since the capture were still there, but they were lighter, almost faint. She stretched slowly, listening to the sounds of the ranch, the soft lowing of cows, the quiet rustle of the horses, and the distant calls of the workers starting their day. Somehow, the sounds that had once made her tense now felt almost normal. She dressed quickly in the simple clothes Samuel had provided, clothes that were clean and practical. Naomi remembered the first day she had arrived and how strange and frightening everything had seemed. Now, each corner of the ranch felt slightly more familiar. She could navigate the paths without stumbling, recognize the barns and fences, and even spot where the chickens and goats usually moved in the morning. Small knowledge, small control, but it mattered. When she stepped outside, Samuel was already in the fields, checking the fences and observing the horses. Naomi paused for a moment, watching him. His movements were steady, confident, yet careful. He did not rush. He did not yell. He simply went about his work, precise and deliberate. Naomi felt a strange mixture of admiration and relief. She had been so sure he would be cruel, so sure he would enforce his authority with harshness. Yet every day, he proved her wrong. Samuel noticed her watching and nodded slightly. Naomi blinked and looked away, pretending to busy herself with gathering eggs. She felt embarrassed to be caught staring, yet she also felt a flicker of connection. He acknowledged her presence without expectation, without judgment. It was a gesture that made her heart lighten in a way she did not fully understand. After breakfast, Samuel asked her to help in the barn again. Naomi hesitated for only a moment. The work was hard, lifting hay, cleaning stalls, moving buckets of water, but it was not punishment. He did not force her, only guided her when needed, showing her the proper way to lift the hay or calm a nervous horse. Naomi began to understand that work on the ranch was not about control through fear, but about responsibility and care. Over the next few days, Naomi's confidence grew slowly. She learned to recognize the signs of a horse that was nervous or upset, how to move quietly so as not to startle the animals, and how to listen to the small sounds of the barn for changes. Samuel watched her progress without hurry or complaint. When she succeeded at a task, he offered a nod or a quiet smile, not loud praise, not forced compliments, just acknowledgement. It was enough. Naomi felt pride the first in weeks, maybe months. One morning, Samuel took Naomi to the fields to see the cattle. She had never been so close to them before. At first, she felt intimidated by their size, their strength, and the unpredictability of their movements. But Samuel showed her how to approach calmly, how to speak softly, how to guide them without fear. Naomi followed his instructions carefully, and soon she was moving with a natural rhythm, leading the animals gently to their pens. Samuel watched quietly, his face calm, and Naomi felt something that surprised her: satisfaction. She was learning, she was contributing, and she was doing it without fear. As the days passed, Naomi began to notice small acts of care that Samuel did not even seem to think about. He would repair a broken fence quietly before the cattle could damage the crops. He would leave water for the chickens and goats, moving among the animals as if he knew each one personally. Sometimes, he would quietly hand Naomi a tool or a bucket without speaking, trusting her to understand. These small acts built a silent bond between them, a trust that grew with each passing day. Naomi also observed how Samuel treated his workers. He spoke to them with respect, listened when they had suggestions, and offered guidance without anger or scolding. The workers respected him, not out of fear, but because he treated them fairly. Naomi had seen men in her life use power cruelly, and the contrast was stark. Samuel's strength was not in domination, but in care and consistency. One afternoon, Naomi was cleaning the barn when a young worker accidentally dropped a heavy bucket of water, spilling it across the floor. Naomi froze, expecting Samuel to shout or scold. But he calmly came over, helping the worker clean up, speaking softly and guiding them through the mistake. Naomi felt her chest tighten. The kindness, the patience, it was almost overwhelming. The monster she had feared, the cruel captor she had imagined, was nowhere here. Instead, she saw a man who could handle mistakes with calm and understanding. Naomi began to feel a small sense of freedom she had not experienced since her capture. She could move through the ranch, work, and learn without constant fear. She began to make small decisions: which chores to do first, how to organize the tools, how to interact with the animals. Samuel allowed her space, never micromanaging, never forcing her. He trusted her abilities, and in turn, Naomi began to trust him. One evening, Naomi walked to the edge of the fields to watch the sunset. Samuel was nearby, repairing a section of fence, and he glanced at her with a quiet nod. Naomi smiled faintly and returned to her work, carrying water to the animals. The day had been long but productive. She felt tired, yes, but satisfied. For the first time, she began to imagine a life where her days could be structured, meaningful, and even safe. Over the following week, Naomi's trust in Samuel deepened in ways she could not fully explain. She noticed how he listened when she spoke, even when the words were broken or incomplete. He never forced her to answer questions she did not want to, and he respected her silence. Naomi began to share small details about her life, stories of her family, and the mountains where she had grown up. Samuel listened quietly, nodding, never judging, never interrupting. The simple act of listening made Naomi feel seen, human, and respected. One morning, Naomi helped Samuel feed the horses. A young colt was nervous, stumbling with each step. Naomi instinctively moved closer, remembering the lessons she had learned. She spoke softly, moved gently, and slowly guided the colt to calmer ground. Samuel watched, his expression calm but approving. Naomi felt a surge of pride. She realized that the knowledge Samuel had given her was not just about survival or chores. It was about trust, about learning to interact with the world without fear. The bond between Naomi and Samuel grew quietly, almost imperceptibly. It was not spoken in words of affection or friendship, but in shared work, in patience, and in mutual respect. Naomi began to understand that trust was not an instant gift but a steady process, built through repeated actions and quiet observation. She also realized that fear, though powerful, could be challenged, softened, and even replaced by understanding. One afternoon, Naomi noticed Samuel struggling with a stubborn gait. Without thinking, she stepped forward and offered help. He looked at her, surprised for a moment, then nodded. Together, they lifted the heavy wood, securing the gate. Naomi felt the strength of their teamwork, the silent cooperation that had developed over days of shared labor. She realized in that moment that she no longer viewed Samuel solely as a captor. He was a teacher, a guide, and perhaps something she could even trust. At night, Naomi lay in her small room, reflecting on the day. She thought of her family and the mountains she had loved, and though she still missed them, she began to see the ranch as a place of possibility, not imprisonment. She thought of Samuel and the quiet patience he showed every day. For the first time, Naomi allowed herself to feel a faint sense of safety, a fragile thread of hope that maybe, just maybe, her life here could be more than survival. It could be learning, growth, and understanding. As the days turned into weeks, Naomi became more comfortable in her routines. She fed the animals, swept the barn, carried water, and even began helping with small repairs around the house. Each task taught her something new, and each small accomplishment gave her confidence. Samuel observed quietly, offering guidance only when necessary, allowing her to learn through experience. Naomi realized that this was a kind of trust she had never known before, and it felt powerful. One morning, Naomi followed Samuel to a distant part of the ranch she had never visited. The land stretched endlessly, filled with grazing animals and fertile fields. Samuel showed her how to check fences, how to spot signs of trouble in the herd, and how to care for the soil. Naomi worked carefully, noticing the depth of knowledge Samuel possessed and the quiet pride he took in the land. She began to see that his strength was not in force or fear, but in care, knowledge, and consistency. By the end of part 3, Naomi felt a profound shift within herself. The fear that had defined her journey since her capture had softened. She was not naive. She knew dangers existed, and she knew the world was unpredictable. But she had begun to recognize that not all power was cruel. Samuel was not the monster she had imagined. He was patient, kind, and consistent, a man whose strength was measured by his actions, not by fear. For the first time, Naomi allowed herself to feel something approaching hope. She could imagine a future where she was capable, trusted, and even valued. She knew the road ahead would be uncertain, but she also knew she had already taken the first steps toward understanding, trust, and perhaps even belonging. The morning air was crisp and quiet, the kind of calm that made Naomi feel both peaceful and alert. For weeks, she had settled into a rhythm on the ranch, learning the ways of the land, the animals, and Samuel. She had grown stronger, more confident, and more aware of her surroundings. But Naomi knew that life was unpredictable, and deep down, a small part of her remained vigilant. Danger could appear at any moment, and she had learned the hard way not to underestimate it. That day began like any other. Naomi helped with the animals, carrying buckets of water to the goats and feeding the chickens. Samuel worked beside her, repairing a fence that had weakened in the winter storms. The sun shone warmly, and a gentle breeze carried the smells of hay, earth, and animals. Naomi felt a rare sense of peace, the kind that comes from understanding one's place and role. She even allowed herself a small smile as a young colt nudged her hand, seeking attention, but the calm did not last. From the edge of the property came the sound of shouting and hoofbeats. Naomi's chest tightened instantly. She had heard these sounds before, far too many times. Her mind raced, imagining the worst: raiders, thieves, or people who wanted to take what was not theirs. She glanced at Samuel, who froze for a brief moment, then moved with quiet precision, guiding the workers to safety and securing the animals. Naomi realized that whatever was coming, Samuel had seen it before and knew exactly how to respond. The attackers arrived on horseback, a small group, but dangerous enough to cause panic. They demanded money, supplies, and control of the ranch. Naomi's heart pounded as she watched the scene unfold, every memory of her capture flooding back. She wanted to run, to hide, to scream, but she also saw Samuel standing calmly, not yelling, not panicking, his eyes steady. He moved among the workers with quiet authority, giving orders in a way that did not frighten but guided. Naomi felt a flicker of admiration mixed with fear. Samuel turned to her, gesturing for her to stay close. Naomi's instinct was to resist, to flee, but she hesitated, studying the calm strength in his posture. He did not rush her, only waited, giving her the space to act without fear. Naomi realized suddenly that she had a choice. She could run to safety and leave the chaos behind, or she could act with courage and help protect the ranch, Samuel, and the animals. Her mind raced. She had never faced such danger, not on her own, not like this. Yet, she remembered the lessons she had learned over the past weeks: how to move quietly, how to calm the animals, how to anticipate problems before they escalated. Naomi took a deep breath, focusing on what she could do, not on what might happen. First, she moved to the barn, checking the horses. The young colt she had grown attached to was frightened, its eyes wide and body tense. Naomi knelt beside it, speaking softly in her own language, stroking its mane. Slowly, the horse calmed, responding to her presence. Naomi felt a surge of relief and pride. She was helping, not just observing. She was contributing to the safety of the ranch. Next, she helped the workers secure the smaller animals, chickens, goats, and a few sheep, into pens. She guided them calmly, speaking in short, clear instructions. Her voice, steady and confident, surprised even her. She realized that Samuel's calm had influenced her. She was no longer paralyzed by fear. She could act, make decisions, and help. Meanwhile, Samuel confronted the attackers with quiet authority. He did not raise his voice or brandish a weapon aggressively. Instead, he spoke firmly, giving clear commands and showing that the ranch was prepared to defend itself without unnecessary violence. Naomi watched closely, learning from his example. She saw that strength did not have to be loud or cruel. It could be calm, deliberate, and focused. The tension rose as one of the attackers tried to force open a gate leading to the fields. Naomi sprang into action, moving quickly to block their path. She shouted at the top of her lungs, a sound that startled even herself, and the attacker faltered. Samuel stepped forward, guiding the situation with a quiet but powerful presence. Together, their actions worked to prevent the intruders from reaching the animals. Naomi realized that she was no longer a passive observer. She had become part of the defense, part of the team. The attackers, realizing the ranch was ready and that Samuel's calm authority was not to be challenged lightly, began to retreat. They left with angry shouts, but no one was harmed. Naomi's body trembled with adrenaline and relief. She had faced a real threat and had acted courageously. She had trusted her instincts, her training, and Samuel's guidance. And for the first time, she understood the true depth of trust and respect between them. After the attackers had left, Samuel checked on Naomi, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. He spoke softly, a few words she did not fully understand, but his tone conveyed care and pride. Naomi felt a warmth in her chest, a connection that went beyond fear or obligation. Samuel was not the monster she had imagined. He was a protector, a guide, and someone she could trust with her safety. The rest of the day was spent repairing minor damages and ensuring the animals were calm. Naomi moved with a new sense of confidence, helping Samuel and the workers, guiding the animals, and ensuring the gates were secure. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. She had faced a threat head-on, and she had survived, contributing to the safety of the ranch and those she had come to care for. That night, Naomi sat outside, watching the stars emerge in the clear sky. The events of the day replayed in her mind: the shouting, the chaos, the fear, and the calm strength she had witnessed in Samuel. She thought of herself, of how she had acted, and for the first time she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. She was no longer just a captive or a frightened stranger. She was someone capable of action, someone who could face challenges and emerge stronger. As she reflected, Naomi realized how much she had grown since the day she had been brought to the ranch. Fear had been her constant companion, shaping her thoughts and reactions. But through observation, guidance, and her own courage, she had begun to change. She had learned that trust could be earned, that strength could be gentle, and that courage could emerge even in the most unexpected moments. Samuel approached her quietly, carrying a lantern. He did not speak loudly or demand attention. He simply sat nearby, the soft light illuminating his face, and gestured for Naomi to rest. She nodded, understanding without words. In that moment, the bond between them was clear, not of master and captive, but of trust and mutual respect. Naomi knew she could rely on him, just as he had relied on her presence and actions during the day's crisis. The next morning, the ranch was quiet again. Naomi moved among the animals and the fields with a new sense of purpose. She had faced danger, acted with courage, and seen the power of calm strength. The events of the previous day had cemented her trust in Samuel, showing her that not all power was cruel, and not all strangers were monsters. Over the following weeks, Naomi continued to learn and grow. She took on more responsibilities, guided the younger animals, and helped Samuel in ways she had never imagined possible. Each day brought new lessons, new challenges, and new opportunities to build confidence. Naomi began to feel a sense of belonging on the ranch, not because she was forced, but because she had earned it through her actions and her willingness to trust. By the end of Part 4, Naomi had changed in profound ways. She had faced a crisis that tested her courage and her trust. She had learned that fear could be managed, that strength could be gentle, and that trust could be built through consistent care and guidance. Most importantly, she had realized that Samuel was not the monster she had feared. He was a man of integrity, patience, and quiet strength, a man who had shown her that safety, respect, and trust could exist even in a world that had once seemed full of danger. Naomi felt a small, steady hope growing inside her. She did not know what the future held, and she still missed her family and the mountains she had left behind. But she knew that she had the skills, the courage, and the understanding to face whatever challenges came next. She was no longer just a frightened girl taken from her home. She was a capable, resilient young woman who had begun to find her place in a new world, guided by the steady hand of someone who had proven himself worthy of her trust. The morning sun rose slowly over the ranch, painting the fields in shades of gold and green. Naomi stood outside, feeling the cool breeze on her face and the warmth of the sun on her shoulders. The world felt calm, alive, and full of quiet possibilities. She had been on the ranch for many weeks now, and the days of fear, uncertainty, and dread seemed like a distant memory. Yet, she knew that those days had shaped her, taught her courage, and prepared her for the life she was beginning to embrace. Naomi moved through the fields with a sense of purpose. She fed the chickens, checked the water buckets for the goats, and guided the young horses toward the grazing area. Her hands were steady, her movements confident. She had learned the rhythm of the ranch, the patterns of the animals, and the silent cues Samuel had taught her over time. Each day, she grew more capable, more independent, and more aware of her surroundings. Samuel approached quietly, carrying a small basket of apples. He greeted her with a nod and a gentle smile, the same calm presence that had guided her through every challenge since her arrival. Naomi returned the smile, feeling a sense of connection that went beyond words. She had learned to trust him not blindly, but through observation, experience, and shared effort. The bond between them was now solid, built on respect, patience, and understanding. "Today," Samuel said softly, gesturing toward the fields, "we will check the fences and prepare for the evening feeding." Naomi nodded, understanding immediately. The instructions were simple, yet they required attention and care. She followed him, carrying tools and supplies, her mind alert to every detail. The animals responded to her presence, calm and trusting. Naomi realized that she had become part of the ranch's rhythm, a participant in its quiet, steady life. As they worked, Naomi reflected on her journey. She thought of her family and the mountains she had left behind. She thought of the fear she had felt when she was first captured, the terror of being dragged from her home, the uncertainty of the unknown, and the expectation that she would be harmed. And she compared it to the present, a world where she was safe, respected, and valued. The contrast was remarkable. Naomi realized that fear, though powerful, had been only one part of her story. Courage, trust, and understanding had grown alongside it, and those qualities now guided her every action. In the afternoon, Naomi helped Samuel repair a section of fence that had been weakened by a storm the previous week. She lifted the wooden planks, held them steady, and worked with careful precision. Samuel guided her hands when necessary, but for the most part, he allowed her to act independently. Naomi felt a surge of pride and satisfaction. She had learned so much, and the skills she had gained were more than practical, they were empowering. She had discovered her own strength, her own ability to face challenges and contribute meaningfully. Later, Naomi led a small group of animals back to their pens for feeding. The young colts she had tamed weeks before followed her easily, moving with calm confidence. Naomi spoke softly, guiding the animals with quiet authority. She realized how far she had come, from a frightened girl dragged from her home, trembling and unsure, to someone capable of caring for and guiding others. The transformation was gradual, built on small acts of trust, courage, and learning. As evening approached, Naomi returned to the house with Samuel. The workers had finished their tasks, and the ranch was peaceful once more. Naomi felt a deep sense of satisfaction as she looked out over the fields, watching the animals settle and the sun dip toward the horizon. She understood that this peace had been earned through effort, patience, and collaboration. And she knew that she had played a part in creating it. After dinner, Naomi sat quietly by the fire in her small room. She thought about Samuel and the way he had guided her through each day, never forcing, never judging, always offering patience and understanding. She realized that he had not only protected her but had also taught her the value of trust, respect, and responsibility. Samuel was not the monster she had feared. He was a man of integrity, capable of both strength and compassion. Naomi's thoughts turned to her family again. She missed them deeply, and she wondered if she would ever see them again. Yet she also understood that her life had changed irrevocably. She could not undo the events that had brought her here, but she could choose how to respond to them. She could choose to embrace the skills, knowledge, and trust she had gained. She could choose to find her own place in this new world. Over the next few weeks, Naomi continued to grow in confidence and independence. She helped with chores, guided the animals, and even began assisting Samuel with small decisions about the ranch. She discovered a sense of purpose she had never known before. Each day brought new lessons and opportunities to prove her own capability. Naomi realized that her fear had taught her to be cautious, but her courage and trust had taught her to act, to learn, and to thrive. One morning, Naomi stood at the edge of the fields, watching the sunrise. The world was quiet, full of promise. She felt a sense of freedom she had never experienced before. Not freedom from danger, but freedom in knowing her own strength, her own abilities, and her own choices. Naomi knew she could face challenges, protect those she cared about, and make decisions for herself. She had grown beyond the girl who had been dragged from her home, trembling and uncertain. Samuel approached her, carrying a basket of feed. He spoke softly, pointing toward the animals and the morning tasks. Naomi nodded, ready to begin. She had learned so much from him, not just about ranch work, but about life, trust, and courage. She realized that he had not only guided her through the physical challenges, but had also nurtured her confidence, her sense of agency, and her understanding of human kindness. As they worked together, Naomi felt a quiet contentment settle over her. She thought of the journey she had taken, the fear, the uncertainty, the challenges, and the small victories along the way. She thought of the lessons she had learned, the courage she had discovered, and the trust she had built. And she understood something deeply, that life, even in its harshest moments, could also be a source of growth, understanding, and hope. In the evening, Naomi sat by the fire once more, reflecting on everything that had happened. She thought of the mountains she had loved, the family she had missed, and the fear that had once dominated her life. But she also thought of the ranch, the animals, Samuel, and the sense of belonging she had found here. She realized that her journey had been about more than survival. It had been about discovering her own strength, her own resilience, and her own capacity to trust and act with courage. Naomi looked around the small room she now called her own. The quilt on the bed, the basin of water, and the simple furnishings all reminded her of how far she had come. She had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. She had learned that not all power was cruel, not all strangers were monsters, and that trust could be built through patience, consistency, and care. As night fell over the ranch, Naomi felt a deep sense of peace. She thought of the animals she had guided, the chores she had completed, and the challenges she had overcome. She thought of Samuel and the quiet strength he had shown her, the trust he had placed in her, and the lessons he had taught without ever forcing them upon her. Naomi realized that she had found more than safety here. She had found understanding, growth, and the beginnings of belonging. Before closing her eyes, Naomi took a deep breath, letting the cool night air fill her lungs. She thought of the journey ahead, knowing that challenges would still come, but confident in her ability to face them. She had discovered her courage, built trust, and learned the value of patience, care, and understanding. Naomi had transformed from a frightened girl into a capable, resilient young woman, ready to embrace the life she had been given and the possibilities that lay before her. As she drifted to sleep, Naomi felt a quiet hope blooming inside her heart. The ranch, the animals, and Samuel had taught her that life could be both challenging and beautiful, that trust could replace fear, and that courage could grow even in the face of uncertainty. For the first time in many weeks, she slept without trembling, without fear, and without doubt. She slept knowing that she had found not just safety, but strength, understanding, and the beginnings of a new life filled with possibility.